Okay, hey there. Thanks for joining us. We're back at another episode of the Community Pulse. This is episode 5, and I am your host, Jason Hand, at Jason Hand on Twitter.
And I'm your co-host, Mary Thingval, at Mary_Grace on Twitter.
And we've got two awesome guests with us today here. We've got Carrie Jones and David Spinks from CMX Media. We'll let both of them introduce themselves just a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Carrie Jones. I'm at CareMJO on Twitter. And I am the director of content for CMX. After having built community for 2 startups in the Bay Area, David and I joined forces to really build the community industry as a whole together. So we've been doing that since 2014. So for almost 2 years, coming up on 2 years now. So, yeah.
And I'm the CEO of CMX. I've been building community my whole life, professionally for about 8 years. And basically, yeah, just over time, got to know a lot of other community professionals, and I built community for a number of different companies. I built a few companies and just consistently ran into a lot of the same challenges over and over again, recognizing that there were a lot of other people running into very similar challenges as community professionals, and seeing the severe lack of resources and ironically, community for community professionals. Launched CMX in February of 2014. And now, it's kind of quickly become the well-known hub for the community industry through our summits, through our online community, through all the content that we work on. We're basically working to advance the community industry and give community professionals all the tools and resources they need to be successful.
Awesome. Yeah, that's kind of how we came to know you all, was through the CMX. Basically, for me anyway, it was the CMX group on Facebook was how I came to know both of you. Mary, I think, had known you a little bit longer, so maybe Mary can speak to that. But once I got brought into that Facebook group, started meeting a lot of really interesting people and talking about some really great, interesting topics that are related to community and just sort of, I don't know, like not just like how to build a community, but even some more meta type of things. So anyway, we can definitely share that in the show notes, but I'd like to commend you on the Facebook page. It's a definite great resource for those of us in the community, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I know I came across the Facebook group several months ago, I guess, and Carrie, I met you at CLS.
Yeah.
We spent a little bit of time talking about it, and I'm actually curious. I mean, you guys have done a few CMX summits now. You've got the Facebook group. Things seem to be going really well. But I know, David, you mentioned, there haven't been a lot of resources for community managers. So how did you figure out how to start that and where to go and what to do?
I mean, it wasn't exactly like an overnight aha. It kind of was the culmination of everything I've worked on in my career. So starting to build community really early on, just started having these conversations. I enjoy writing, so I started writing a lot about it. I actually ended up co-founding the communitymanager.com about 5 years ago now, which is one of the first blogs about community as a profession and how to do it on a strategic level. And through that, just continued to build a network of community professionals, build a reputation, and get a deeper understanding of what everyone's needs are. It led to launching CMX Summit, the conference, which by the time I don't think I ever felt very comfortable launching it, both because I don't think the industry was ready yet, and I don't think I felt ready yet. And then when we finally launched the first summit, it was at a point where things were starting to culminate. It was clear that there were a lot of people doing this. More companies started to become interested in it. And just kind of threw it out there without really knowing what the response would be. I was really nervous, honestly, because I've never hosted a conference before. And, we started CMX as completely bootstrapped. So we didn't have like a budget for anything. Basically, we just put up a sales page for the conference. And as money came in, we would then put a down payment on a venue or put down payment on an AV team. So it was a little bit scary, but people kept buying tickets, and then when we brought everyone together at that summit, the energy was just so strong there. It was bringing together these 300 people that all shared very similar challenges. We're all doing very similar things on a day-to-day basis, but they had no idea that everyone else existed and that other people were facing those same challenges. And they had never been in a room together with so many of them in one place. And so that just created such a strong response. And it became clear that it was the right time for this. And everything kind of just grew from there.
So I haven't, unfortunately, been able to get to the CMX Summit yet, but I hope to make that a priority next year. Now that I've, sort of gotten my feet wet with evangelism, and I hope to really grow out the community efforts in my own company at VictorOps. Can you tell us a little bit more about what types of speakers, what types of topics could we find at that type of a conference? Like what am I going to learn about?
Yeah, so the conference is really meant as like high level. Somebody actually explained it as like the TED for community professionals. So it's really like the people who have really made stuff happen at these big companies like Airbnb and even going back to Yelp and the Yelp Elite story in 2004. You'll hear these stories there, and basically it's meant to inspire and bring people together over these like really amazing stories of what other builders have done. So what are some other great topics? I mean, there was Adam Wehrback of Yurtle, who was also the youngest person to run the Sierra Club, yeah. So he actually has an activist background. So it was about how activism and community share a lot of similarities, and how you can apply community activism to community building as a professional. And it's also about bringing in different types of voices like that. So you won't just hear, other tech stories. It's also about bringing voices from psychology. We had Dr. David McMillan speak at the very first summit, who created the sense of community theory, which is really the backbone, I believe, of all of the work that all of us do every single day as community builders. So he actually spoke at the first summit. That was super cool. We had the head of behavioral analysis for the FBI come and talk about how to build trust in your community. And I'm looking back at those talks like once a week, probably, in all the work that I do. So it's actually super actionable. We had the founder of the FBI's, he was a founder of the behavioral program, wasn't he? Yeah. Joe Navarro, who's also a professional poker player. Yeah, so he studies nonverbal communication and how you can use, so like 70 to 80% of what you communicate is not words, it's your actions and the way you present yourself, even online, the way you write sentences, or the way that you, getting really nitty-gritty details, like the way you punctuate sentences and how many exclamation points you use, like all of that communicates more than the words themselves. So you'll learn like all kinds of allied sort of topics there, as well as learning stories from people who have actually been in the trenches building this stuff at tech companies. And, in the coming year, we plan to bring more people from even more tech companies, nonprofits, media companies, just if someone has an interesting community story to tell, like we want to provide the stage for them to share that information with other people who are doing this work day in and day out. So
that's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to getting there. Do we have a date yet? I know the most recent one wasn't that long ago, but have you looked forward ahead enough to know when you're going to do the next one?
Yeah, next year we'll be doing New York and San Francisco again. New York will be in kind of like April, May time, and San Francisco is usually around October, November. So no hard dates yet. We'll be announcing that very soon.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to share that on our website. And one of our guests last week was Tim Falls. He's actually a good friend of mine that I've known for a while, and he speaks very highly of it, and said I think he's been going to at least the West Coast one for a number of years. And I know he spoke at
the conference we posted, actually.
Yeah. So anything that I trust him.
We do too. We love Tim Falls.
Yeah.
Well, I know the theme this year was community is the future of business. I'd love to dig into that a little bit and just hear what that means on a practical level and how that played out throughout the conference.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of our vision with CMX is that community is the future of business. It's the trend that we see happening. It's a large part of the reason why all of a sudden community is in the spotlight. is this idea that companies are becoming more collaborative in the way they create value. So traditionally, companies have to create all the value for their customers or their audience, whereas a community-driven business creates an environment for people to create value for each other. So they become community-driven, and we're seeing that happen in every kind of company in all different kinds of departments, whether it's for your product, for support, for marketing. It's also an entirely new business model, which we see growing with crowdfunding, crowdsourced content, collaborative consumption. These are all community-centric businesses. And so, that's our vision, is that community is going to continue to grow as the core of business. And everything that we're doing in CMX is to support that industry that will be executing on that world of building community for business.
Yeah, and I'll say too that this is imminent now, and maybe wasn't even back in the 90s, but now there's a convergence of culturally what we're ready for as human beings, and also especially right now in Western culture with everyone being online, Snapchat, all these different social apps that we use. There's the convergence between our culture and the technology that's now available and being created for us that was never available before. So anyone can start a Facebook group from anywhere in the world now, especially with internet.org happening. So it's just the convergence of these two things at the same time. It's going to happen. It's just where things are headed right now. And Facebook groups actually released numbers about a week ago or 2 weeks ago. They have 925 million users logging in every single month. And that's over 60% of overall Facebook users are using groups. So imagine how that's going to change over the coming 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. It's happening.
Which is a couple of years ago or something.
Yeah, it's grown.
So it's growing really fast.
Yeah.
People are seeking more community-driven social experiences online.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I would say I've seen the same thing over the past, I don't know, I haven't really been as close attention for the past, I don't know, 3 years or so. But it does seem that there's this growing way of getting information. People are very much about just sort of consuming information in the way they want to consume it. They don't want to be fed information. They want to develop relationships with the companies that they buy things from. I think there's also this idea that consumers or users or whoever aren't quite as brand loyal as they used to be. So having this effort of actually, it's not just about cutting back on attrition or building up retention, but when you can start to build an actual relationship with the people who either buy your product or use your service or whatever, depending on your business model, there seems to be a bigger or a better amount of trust. And I think companies are starting to see that. Certainly in the tech area, I think they noticed that a lot sooner, that it's not just a nice to have, it's actually quite a bit more critical these days.
Great.
Going back to the information you were just talking about with Facebook, I'm curious because, reportedly, and this was several years ago when I was more involved in social media and more responsible for social media, one of the biggest things that people were saying was, Facebook is not where people go to do work. It's where they go to have fun. And so, when you're posting on there, make sure it's entertaining and it's engaging and all of those types of things. And so I'm curious, the CMX Hub group on Facebook is incredibly popular and incredibly active. Do you see that as unique to your group, or is that just something that's been changing because people are seeking more community with online?
That's a really good question. Facebook is working on a Facebook at work sort of functionality. I think also community professionals are a special breed of people, and that they love their work. Their work is what they want to put out into the world as this the thing that they want to see exist. So there's that, but I think also that just more people are doing work that they love, and so it's not a big jump to go from you know, I'm on Facebook connecting with my friends to I'm on Facebook connecting with people that I want to build things with. So I think that's why like CMX Hub's Facebook group has really taken off, is because these people love what they do and they love building things. And so
Oh, I think we might be having some audio problems.
also all understand that building in community is how you get stuff done, creating things.
Cool. Well, kind of just going a little bit more on that, on the topic of the Facebook group. Like I already mentioned earlier, how, you know, very vibrant it is. I don't know how many members we have in there now, but there's quite a few. And anytime I go into my Facebook timeline and the feed, there's always some new stuff in there. And I'm wondering, it seems like David, you pop in there a lot with just sort of general questions you're asking to the general base of people. Are these questions that you have like a running queue of things that you're just curious to hear people's thoughts on, or do these sort of just come to you and you throw them out? Like, what's the impetus on a lot of these things?
I wish I could say I have it all planned out accordingly, but I think it's both. We identify things that work and then create traditions, or, you know, try to make it a regular thing if it works. So there are a couple things we do, like the welcome thread. Every Monday, I like post this general thread that says, you know, shares a little bit about what's going on in the community, and then I say, you know, this is a chance to welcome all of our new members and for our new members to introduce themselves. I tag every single new person who's joined the group personally in the post, and I tried that in many different iterations over time, and I mean, it just worked, and so I did it again, and I tried to alter it and make it better over time. So when that kind of thing works, I'll do it again. For specific topics and specific discussion points, I mean, honestly, like, this is what we do day in and day out. Like, I live and breathe talking to community professionals. We spend every day interviewing people, curating case studies, having these discussions, and I'm constantly like inspired, and it brings up questions, and it almost always, like, I'll have a spark, like, that's a really good question to throw out to the community. So I'll go back to my computer and put it out there. And so, you know, I try to create more of a format around that, though, so that, you know, I usually post it with like different language. I'll try different stuff, but I usually do, like, if it's a debate, I'll post CMX debate and pose the question in a certain way. So I think it's important when something works to have some repetition there so people know what to expect. If you want to plan out your content strategy, that's a really good thing to do. And again, some areas we do that, and then other areas are more on the fly. I think it's probably important to have both, so it doesn't feel overly manufactured, but you still have that consistency.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like I said, it's every time I hop in there, it's like, wow, that's a really interesting question, and then you start to see some great responses, and it definitely gets my gears turning. And I'm still, you know, very much in the early planning phases of what we're going to do with our community efforts at VictorOps. But I'm starting to kind of keep a list of things to keep in mind as I move forward, and things to not only ask myself but ask our internal stakeholders, and then. Yeah. So anyway, just I had to ask that question because to me it just seems like you either just come out of thin air, or maybe you have this like list, and just every once in a while you just drop this this huge mind blowing question in there.
Yeah, I mean, with questions, it's like I've tried like putting it all into a list before, and sometimes I'll use that. But like, there's a reason that things come up at different times, right? Like, if it's something that all of a sudden I'm really curious about, there's a good chance that there's a lot of other people that are currently curious about it, maybe because of conversations that are happening in other places or stories that are coming out. But yeah, I think it's important to have that like natural, organic flavor to it, because that's what makes it feel real.
Yeah, and just one thing that I know you shared with me a while back is that you discovered that when you post something less as a question and more as like a debate topic, like, here's an engagement tip, say something that is controversial, and instead of asking a question of people and like leaving it kind of, you know, up in the air, what do you think about this, rather say something like, what is one of the things that you've said, you're just like, community is not necessary for all startups, is like an assertion that you'll say or that you'll make, and then people will be like jump in and be like, that's not true, how dare you assault my like integrity, or so it's great to take a stance on things, and that's something that we've done from the very start with CMX. Is we've always taken a stance on what community is, on what we believe it should be. It's not social media. We've taken a very strong stance on that. We actually don't even use the term community manager, because we think it's like, it's such a nebulous title. It doesn't really actually explain what anyone does day to day. So like taking a stance on things in your community is a great way to engage people. And also it weeds out people who aren't really, quote unquote, your people. With any community, you need barriers to inclusion. So that's what debates and taking a stance like really does for you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I actually like the fact that you take a stance and say, community managers are not this, or, this is not the only job title and things like that. David, you mentioned earlier, community's in the spotlight. So how do we make sure that it gets the right kind of attention, that people understand it's not, not just social media, and, here's what the salary should be, and here's the value that these people add to the community, or add to the company as well as the community, and here's their job descriptions and things like that. Like, it's getting a lot of attention, but how do we make sure that it's getting that people are getting the right impressions about it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that gets to the heart of what we're aiming to do with CMX. Our goal isn't to make up what the standards are necessarily, but to organize all the people who are doing this on a day-to-day basis, all the research, all the data behind it, all the psychology studies behind it, and bring it together into more of a standard, so that I think what's important is that all of us who are building community on a day-to-day basis, that we are using consistent language, that we are holding ourselves to a higher standard, that we are executing on things in a consistent way, so that when somebody asks 1,000 different community professionals what they do, how they do it, what their goals are, their answers are all consistent with each other. And that's what will start to reframe the language and businesses' understanding of what it truly means to build community on a professional level.
Awesome. Well, kind of with that, like, Carrie, you had mentioned you shy away from using the term community manager. Obviously, there's community leaders. Like, what do you kind of like, I guess, suggest you call these roles, and then what types of things make for a good community person, or whatever that role is that we want to give it?
Yeah. There's no one solid answer to that, but there is a solid way to figure out the answer, which is that you look at what business value you're driving as a community professional, and you focus the title around that. Like, if you're a community manager building community for a company that needs help with support, you are a community support manager. If you are an evangelist, you are a community evangelist. If you are a community manager who focuses on acquisition, then you're like a community marketing manager. If you are running meetups and small events, you are like a community events manager, and so on and so forth. You look at what value you're driving, and you focus and optimize towards that in your role, and your title should reflect that. I think the problem with community manager as a title is it doesn't actually tell me what value you're creating in the company. So like, if you look at other titles like sales manager, I know that you're responsible for generating revenue, or like a marketing manager, you're responsible for acquiring like leads or converting people into paying customers. So I think community needs to be standardized in the same way.
So it's not quite as simple as saying you want to build a community, therefore you're going to manage that effort. So at that point, we need to be a little bit more specific in terms of what building community may mean. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, especially from a professional standpoint, there is a ton of value in just creating communities in the world that you want to see happen. But if you're being employed to do this by a company, you you better damn well know like why you're building that community. If you don't, that's the problem that I'm seeing again and again and again. It's like burning people out in the industry because they feel like they essentially feel worthless in their role because they can't point to like, I drive this XYZ metrics and that's why I'm valuable. They're like, I'm building a community because it's good. Or like, I'm building a community because like, I know it'll be good for the business to do this. What does that mean? That doesn't really mean anything. And so if you can't point to the value you're creating in your company, like over time, you're just going to work. Either you're going to be like me and you're going to work your ass off and like completely burn out, or you're just going to like lose all motivation and just like you're going to end up leaving the company. And so I think it's really important for us as an industry to understand that we need to be driving a specific business value.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important and something that gets talked about a lot, thankfully, within our sort of industry, if you just want to call it the community industry, is burnout and just keeping that sort of at bay. I know personally, I think I'm actually sort of just coming out of a little bit of a burnout mode, mostly just due to just extreme amount of travel and speaking engagements. But there's lots of different things that can kind of lead us into this mode of apathy and just not only do I not want to do anything, I'm not sure I'm actually making a difference. And there's all kinds of things. Burnout is a whole other episode I think we could talk about for 40 minutes or so.
Yeah.
But
that a big reason for it is not understanding the value you're creating. So not being able to prioritize your day-to-day work.
Yeah.
So you never feel like you're done ever, ever, ever.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think that's perpetuated by our managers not understanding why we're doing what we're doing and the company not understanding why we're doing what we're doing. And it's a vicious cycle that we really need to break. And I think some companies are finally starting to get to that point, and I'm glad to see it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the thing there. It's not up to the companies and the managers to like change their mentality, because that's not how the world works. It's up to us. It's up to us as community professionals to create that definition, to set those standards, to be able to point to the right metrics. And you might do all that and then still find yourself at a company that like just refuses to get it or adopt it, and that's one thing. But it's up to us to treat our work as a discipline, to set standards, to communicate what we're working on, why we're working on it, and what our limitations are. The problem, like Carrie said, is because it's so nebulous, you're kind of doing everything without being able to point to any one specific value. And so you're taking on way too much onto your plate. And when you want to go to your manager and say, hey, like I have too much on my plate, I need to take some stuff off, there's no basis for that. There's no backup to say, like, here's what I'm going to focus on and why. So, like, yes, a lot of companies still struggle to understand it. And yes, a lot of managers still have misguided expectations of community professionals, but that's not going to change just because we want it to. It's up to community professionals. Like what we like to say is, you're the CEO of community in your company, and it's up to you to help the business move in the right direction to be community driven. It's not just going to happen unless we take that initiative and put the right pieces in place.
Yeah, those
are
all great points. Yeah. Well, hey, we're getting a little bit close on time, so maybe we should sort of start moving into our checkouts. And this is just where we kind of go around and ask our guests, like, what are some resources that you'd like to share with us? Those could be websites, events, blog posts, people that they should be kind of paying attention to. So, David and Carrie, what kind of resources and checkouts can you share with us?
Okay, I guess I'm first. Yeah, so we're actually working right now on, basically we've been working for the last 2 years almost on just creating the best possible content that's out there. So interviewing all these industry leaders. And right now we've learned a ton doing that. And so we're putting together the pieces of like a fundamentals of community, like the foundational principles that you need to understand in order to do this from a business standpoint. So we've developed pretty much our own framework for doing this. There's like 7 pieces of it. It's really official. And so we're working on that right now. So I'll be really excited to share with you guys once we have that live. But in general, other resources to check out, we have our CMX Hub blog. I also highly recommend following Evan Hamilton, his community manager breakfast newsletter. And also if you're in the Bay Area or New York City now, you can attend those events in person. He curates some amazing content for community people. He's also been doing this for a really long time. Meetups. We also have our CMX series meetups. Those are in Vancouver, New York, San Francisco. We have small ones happening here in Seattle, where I live. Chicago, yes. Yeah, so that'll be more formalized in 2016, but those are great. If you're in a city or if you want to start one, just send us an email at info@cmxhub.com and we'll get you set up and let you know who else is in your city. To read, let's see, reading resources. I'm always reading Seth Godin. I think if you ever want like high level inspiration, I'm just like, why am I doing this work again? And then I read Seth Godin and I'm like, oh yeah, this is all inevitable and I need to I need to, pushing on. So yeah, I think those are all should keep you going.
Yeah. Let's see, what else can I add? We have a couple ebooks. We have one that's on content strategy for community professionals, written by Clem Ayum, who's right here. And we have a guide to community platforms ebook as well. If you're looking for what tool to use for your community, you can download that. Those are both free. CMX Summit, obviously, we're doing 2 a year in the US. Another good newsletter to read is Sarah Judd Welsh's Community Is. So it's community.is, right, is the website. Another really good curation of different resources. Each one has a really good theme, and Sarah's been doing this for a really long time and has unique perspectives on it. And a good book, read The Culting of Brands by Douglas Atkin. He ran community for Meetup and for Airbnb. He spoke at CMX Summit and was one of the highest rated speakers we ever had. And he wrote this book a while back called The Culting of Brands, which basically dug into how this trend was starting to form a while back. And he just got such a good perspective on how cults work and the psychology behind communities. And he brings that all into what that means for brands. So it's very relevant today.
I thought of another book too while you were talking. Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I mean, that's the foundational idea behind all great communities, is the why of what you're doing. So if you only have 10 minutes, watch his TED Talk because it sums it up really, really well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's a great list of resources, and this has been an amazing conversation. So I really appreciate both of you taking the time to join us today.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you guys, we'll definitely love to have you back on the show. These things go way too fast. It feels like we're just starting to scratch the surface of really important topics and conversations. So we're going to take everything that you've shared with us, and we'll be sure to add that into our show notes and share everything that you've given us in terms of great information. And hopefully we'll run into each other very soon. I definitely would like to make it out to CMX Summit.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And you just reminded me, if you want to continue to have these conversations all the time, we spoke about the group earlier. That's one of the best resources you can join right now. If you just search for CMX Hub on Facebook, you'll find the group, and you're all welcome. And that's where a lot of these conversations are continuing to happen.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. That's it for this episode of the Community Pulse. And I'm your co-host, Mary Thingvall. I'm at Mary_Grace on Twitter.
And I'm Jason Hand, at Jason Hand on Twitter.
And we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Bye.